2 points really. One is, for me, one of the most disappointing things about the budget is the complete lack of consultation that's happened with it. For me, this is a real dreadful mistake. Lots of other councils of very ordinary, mainstream Tory persuasion do serious consultation on their budgets with their staff, service users and citizens, and ours hasn't, and I think that's really terribly disappointing. It's perfectly possible to do it. We're told by Jason that we're not allowed to reveal anything at all about the budget because of an arrangement we have with the trade unions that we've let them know first. Now, I'm sure that we could have a serious discussion, sit down with the trade unions and say, we respect that point of view, but surely there is a way, a middle way, whereby we could actually take this out for consultation with staff, with service users, with the local population, and actually, so this was a budget which more people have been involved in and seeing what the difficult choices are, because the point about how bad the attack on local government and local democracy is extremely important. We're seeing the end of local democracy, in my view, through this process of closing down the financial room for councils. So that's the first point. We have to change that so that in future years there is a serious budget consultation process. It's been extremely disappointing and frustrating. There hasn't been this year. The second thing is, the reason why it's so important that the Green councils, and actually Labour, I mean, if they were here, I'd say to the Labour councils, don't vote for the cuts budget. No, don't vote for it. Let the Tories vote it through, because it is their budget. Yes. Let them vote it through. Don't vote for it. The reason why it's so important, though, I think for those of us who are in the Green Party, that we shouldn't vote for this cuts budget, is because for me, the political situation is such that people are desperate for a political alternative. People have seen all the mainstream parties become Tweedledum, Tweedledee, act the same way, and people are very frustrated, and a lot of people are moving to the right, to UKIP. A lot of people in other countries are moving to Le Pen's party in France, which is probably going to come top of the European poll in the European elections next year. Lots of people are moving to the right because they're so frustrated because there's no political alternative. To just have here one group of people saying, do you know what, we're not going to vote for this cuts budget, we are an alternative, that would give people real hope. So I say to Green Party people, don't snuff out people's hope. Let them see that there is a real political alternative and let it be the Green Party. Don't vote for a cuts budget. Vote it down if you can, and if you can't, at least your conscience is clear. You've not voted for a Tory budget. Let the Tories vote it through because it's their budget.
As a point of information, at Jubilee Library there are lots of consultation documents about the budget, about the council's budget. On the council's website there's lots of information about the democratic process. You know, you can put an input in. The Brighton Independent has written a piece about the budget. You can write lots of places. The Argus has your opinion. You know, there's loads of places you can put feedback. This is a council budget. You know, it's not just the Green Party, as other people have said. You know, it's the whole administration. But there is a consultation process right now at Jubilee Library and elsewhere.
Yeah, I just to follow on from that, there are mechanisms by which we are ostensibly being invited to comment on the budget. There is a consultation of sorts happening. Jason Kitcat is actually doing an open door question and answer session webcast on Tuesday, and one of the things I was going to bring along as a suggestion is we could ask him questions. You can ask questions via the council's website or by Twitter. So, I mean, we could all ask him a lot of questions about that. And one of the documents that I was looking at had information about the feedback that they had received from people on the kind of, you know, what should we cut tool that they put on their website. Which was, the feedback was, most people wanted the same amount of money or more money spent on all their services. You know, which isn't surprising, but it seems to me that is a clear mandate for any councillor who wants to vote against a cuts budget, is that, you know, what consultation has been done has produced a very clear result, that people don't want the cuts. Are there any women who would like to speak? Yes, Liz.
I'm Liz Wakefield, one of the local Green Party councillors. It's very easy to do consultation. When I was chair of housing, I'm not anymore, but when I was chair of housing, I did consultation with the people with the tenants assembly when all the council tenants got together in Ho Town Hall. and had a conference, and it was an extremely, officers helped me do it. The officers in the council really wanted tenants to have a say in how their money that they're paying as rents was being spent and stuff. And we did a consultation, as I say, not now, because I'm not chair of housing and I'm not sure what's happening with the current chair of housing at the moment. But when I was chair of housing, I'm talking about what I did, and we did do a very simple consultation when all the tenants came together. You literally had, you know, bits of paper, sort of sticky things that represented amounts of money, you know, in its thousands or whatever, and they chose as tenants where, in small groups, where to put those amounts of money, if you like, on the budget. And it was very interesting, and then that got fed back. So there's a lot of, I agree with Davey that if there's a will, there's a way of getting a lot more consultation going in the city. I don't feel there's been so much consultation this year. If there has been, even as a councillor, I don't know of it, which is worrying.
Any more contributions or ideas or experiences?
Can I, obviously I'm not a woman, but I would just like to feedback if I can on a bit of the points that a couple of people have made. I think the most important one, is that okay with you and with the room? Because there's a couple of points. First, the most important is the point that the lady at the front made, that this is, and you know, make no bones about it, a cuts budget, and there are some cuts that will fall on particular services. They will impact on particular individuals, and you talked about some of them, and that's very painful to all of us as councillors. We don't want any of that. That's what this is all about as far as I'm concerned. And we can argue about particular services, but I'll tell you, if we, as a council, put all the money back into that service that you've described, then we've only got to take it from somewhere else, and then there will be a different set of people saying, hang on a minute, the service we're using, now you want to cut it, you want to cut staff, you want to do this, and they want to make these arguments, and that's where I think there comes a time where you've got to say enough is enough. We're not going to take ownership for any of these bloody cuts. As Davey said, they're Tory cuts, let them make them. But, you know, that's the most important point. About consultation, we have to remember that the budget final decision will be taken at the end of February, okay? The final proposals on which the council will vote in February will be published mid-February. That's quite a long time away. Now, we've seen initial proposals published just yesterday or last week, but that's exactly what they are, initial proposals. Now, it would have been great if there had already been a long process of consultation. I would have much preferred to see that, to be honest, but we are where we are. The point is we've now got, almost a quarter of a year of a period in which all the points that people in this room really want to make about the budget can be made. Now, I hope that main point is, well, don't go for it, but, you know, others may have different views. That's not the point. The point is there is space to make them. There's going to be a series of scrutiny meetings, which are all very kind of boring council speak for officers and councillors involved in different areas of services, getting together with a representative from the community and voluntary sector to hammer through the proposals line by line and to talk about the 15 grand here, the 20 grand there, whatever. This will happen, and these are all public meetings. There is an awful lot of process, and it's all available on the council's website for anyone who wants to take part in these consultations. And I really hope that people do, not because the consultation process is perfect, because it isn't, but because it's better that we take part in something that isn't perfect than we you know, to use the cliche, let the good be the enemy of the best, and just don't engage with it at all. And, you know, finally, I would say really quickly, in response to the point that Rob made earlier, I think there's been a lot of discussion about it. The Greens are in the minority. If the Greens, or a majority of the Greens, voted against the budget, well, it's quite possible that Labour and the Tories would vote it through. I personally don't think that's very likely. I think their strategists would sit there and think, well, actually, we don't want to be we don't want to be on the same side as this other party. But I don't know, it's a matter for them. But all I know is that as a councillor, there will be a budget, it will be the budget, if it's adopted, that the Greens have drawn up according to the principles I described earlier. I think that's probably better than most of the alternatives that anyone else is likely to come up with. And my conscience as a councillor will be clear, because I wouldn't have voted for the kind of cut we heard just described a few minutes ago over there.
Yeah.
I'm Phil, and a member of the Green Party. I think because I'm not speaking as a councillor to speak as a member of a political party. As a member of a political party, the point is to take a political position in relation to what's happening in our society and what's happening in relation to how people are being attacked, and to support a struggle against that. And I think it's clear, and it's clear in our policies as a Green Party, that we must, and locally as well, that we must take a political position, which is to oppose the cuts. And I'm sorry that the councillors are in this difficult position, because they are having to manage the difficult situation. But as a party, I think it's absolutely clear what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to say wear two hats. One, I'm a member of the Green Party, and the other one is I work for the council. And the council staff are under an awful lot of stress at the moment. They've had cuts made to their jobs. They're working increasingly hard, and they are powerless to actually do anything about it. And it would be, I'm sure a lot of council staff would actually agree with a strategy of not voting for the budget, because all they can see down the line is their services cut, jobs cut, people suffering, and you know, I don't want to work for a council where I'm inflicting pain on other people, as well as having the stress of not knowing whether I've got a job next year. So I think a lot of people in a wider context would support that and what Ben is suggesting.
Thank you. George and then Renee.
Well, just a quick point. Something that came up last week at the Council Against the Cuts meeting was that the threat hanging over local councils is that if they don't toe the line and make the cuts and balance the budget, then Eric Pickles' commissioners would come in and set things arbitrarily. Now the point is that there aren't enough commissioners around in every council to do this. So, I mean, what they're thinking of doing is, to what extent can they, engineer a revolt on a sufficient scale?
Yeah. Renee?
Well, all I would like to say is roll on the day when a consultation is about the crucial matters of whether or not we replace the giant slide in the park or do the extra tree planting this year or next year. Unfortunately, and I'm stating the obvious, that before this anti-austerity attack on local government and all our public services came in with this coalition government, let's have a look at what our budget's covered. Already, to be honest, from a Green Party view, the money was inadequate for a start. You know, we would go for a much more progressive taxation. Probably we would bring in council tax as part of a general taxation which would be based on people's income and their ability to pay. And it would be a far more progressive taxation bringing in the money that we needed. There were many, many problems that were year after year not addressed in all sort of sectors. And if we've got a 29% increase in the older population who died, the excess winter deaths last year, 31,000 died who wouldn't have died if it hadn't been for the cold. They died in the cold because they're either heating or eating their places. And I found out at a conference on Friday where a story that I've been using for about 5 or 6 years came from. It came from Finland. I won't try and do the accent because I don't know how to do it, but it said, in our country too, more old people die during the winter, but not when they're in their own homes. You know, when they're outdoors. And so we know this, and with the software, and computer power we've got, we could probably generate the lists of names and addresses of all the people who are going to die this winter coming because of low incomes, because we're not in control of our energy. And of course, let's look at it, climate change. If we don't start tackling that now, things will only get worse, get more expensive, we will need more funds to invest. And we actually know in the Greens that we could invest in creating many more jobs. There are so many necessary jobs out there. We could renationalise all the large energy generating and distribution sectors as well. So we would have control of the prices. We could use the 20% of the fossil fuels that we know exactly where they are already, and there's the maximum we should be allowed to burn without taking us past 2 degrees C. We could use that in order to create all the infrastructure that we need, creating much more jobs-rich industries, tackling unemployment, but we would also, not just with the public transport and housing, but we would put more money back into our public services, improve our public services, and make sure that people got the help that they needed. So there wasn't enough money to start with. Yes, I'm sure Greens worked really hard. When I was a councillor at Lewisham, we'd had years of mostly a Labour council under a Labour government. They'd pretty much just gone to meetings and rubber stamped what the officers did, because the officers was doing what the government had asked them to do. We came in and started looking at things, and suddenly everyone was, getting their heckles up, but we were actually having an interesting and creative look. Actually, there are some efficiencies occasionally that aren't cuts, but once you have cuts imposed on you, then you really have to start saying, what sort of society do we want to live in?
Yeah.
Where do we want the money to go?
Yeah.
Where is the money? There's loads of money out there. It's just in the wrong hands.
Yes.
So, it's a bit earlier than I was thinking, but perhaps we should have a little break now, have some tea and coffee, come back and talk, and try and really focus down on what all of us can actually do to affect the situation in Brighton and Hove. What's realistic about what can happen this coming February? Whether we can affect that. Is that okay with everyone? There's cake even.
Cake! First come, first